My husband has left me, and he doesn't want our child either. We had a huge fight a month ago, but I can't even remember what it was about. It was probably some trivial nonsense again, words escalating until we hurled the most venomous insults at each other, neither willing to give in or compromise. After I unleashed a hysterical tirade, he blurted out, "Don't think I don't know you've been in contact with Paul again. Is Richard his child?" "Richard is the son my husband and I had together, just a little over a year old." He sat in his stroller, wide-eyed, watching us silently without crying, but his little face was all scrunched up, clearly terrified by this drama. I was trembling with anger, my chest heaving violently, my head buzzing, completely blank, unable to say a word. I just grabbed Richard and headed for the door. He grabbed my hand, trying to stop me, but I shook him off forcefully. My nails accidentally scratched his face, leaving a red mark. We both froze for a moment. He glared at me angrily, and I shouted, "Yes, you really are a big fool. Just realizing it today. If you have the guts, come with me to the Civil Affairs Bureau right now." In the end, we drove to the Civil Affairs Bureau. There were very few people there that day. I hastily drafted an agreement at the counter, pressed my fingerprint, signed my name, and handed it to him. He glanced at it quickly and signed without hesitation. The agreement was simple: I would leave with nothing but the child. After all, he believed the child wasn't his biological son and wouldn't contest custody. The cars, the house, company shares, savings, even gold and jewelry, all of that belonged to him. It wasn't that I was pretending to be noble. When I married him, I was alone. All those things were either given by his family or earned by him. During the years we were together, he never neglected me financially, so I had no reason to fight over those assets. After a month of cooling off, today we were officially divorced in the truest sense. After the divorce, I took Richard back to my parents' home. Originally, my family lived in a remote, impoverished area, but thanks to my ex-husband's generous support, we had now moved to a nearby town. At home, my parents and younger brother saw me returning alone with the child on the bus. They asked why my ex-husband Vicent wasn't with me. I gave them a cold look and told them directly that I had divorced him. My family just thought we had a quarrel, and since I've always been firm at home, they didn't dare to ask too much. They carefully tidied up the room and arranged for me to stay. Richard was very unsettled by the change of environment and often cried late into the night. Fortunately, my mother helped me take care of him attentively. Children adapt quickly, and within a week he was back to normal. During the day, I took care of the child at home, often lost in thought. Looking at my son, whose features were almost identical to Vicent's, my heart ached faintly. "Vicent, I could endure everything else, but you cannot humiliate me like this." Vicent's parents soon got in touch with me, insisting on meeting me. Both university professors, they were dignified, gentle, and polite, never interfering in matters between me and my ex-husband. Since they had treated me well before, contributing money and effort, as the younger generation, I couldn't disregard their kindness. The meeting place was the old house where the elderly couple lived. I knew Grandpa and Grandma wanted to see their grandson, so I brought Richard inside alone. Richard's grandmother attentively served tea and poured water, inviting me to sit down. Grandpa took the child from my hands and entertained Richard with toys, making him laugh heartily. I saw Vicent had also arrived, dressed in casual sportswear, still handsome as ever, but he seemed to have lost some of his former youthful vigor. When our eyes met, the fierce anger from our confrontation that day was gone, replaced only by a calm sense of regret. Grandma, seeing the silence between Vicent and me, gently took my hand and whispered, "Bonnie, this time it's all Vicent's fault. Could you, for the sake of us old folks, forgive him just this once?" I said nothing as my father shouted at my ex-husband, "You bastard, are you mute? Richard is obviously your son, how can you say such heartless things? Apologize to Bonnie immediately." Vicent and I were both stunned, we had never heard my father raise his voice like that before. It was clear this time he was truly angry. Vicent didn't dare act out in front of his parents, but he still said in a low voice, "Mom, Dad, this is our own business. You don't need to get involved." Vichant has always been strong-willed. In college, he ignored his parents' warnings and started a business with a few friends. Now that he's successful, there's no way he would let his parents control him. Vichant refused to back down. His parents declared that they wouldn't acknowledge him as their son, but they would recognize their grandson. They gave me a bank card and said the child support would be deposited regularly, so I could just bring the child over to visit the elderly couple when I had time. I pushed the card back. "Mom, Dad, I thank you on Richard's behalf, but since we're already divorced, I can't accept your money anymore." A few days later, I saw a photo posted by Tony, a mutual friend of Vichant and me. It showed Vichant with his first love. They, along with a group of friends, had gone on an off-road trip in several SUVs. The scenery was beautiful, and the people were attractive, but I had no time to appreciate it because Richard was crying again. I hurriedly put down my phone and picked up the child. Seeing that I had stayed at home for a whole month without Vichant coming to see me, my family finally believed that we had truly broken up. Dad's attitude changed noticeably. Abandoning his usual fatherly kindness, he gave me a harsh scolding, calling me stupid for easily giving up such a wealthy and powerful husband's family, especially with a son in tow. He said no fool would want me in the future. Mom and my younger brother sided with me but didn't dare to argue with Dad. His temper was always bad. He loved drinking and smoking, often getting drunk every few days. Whenever he was in a bad mood, he would lash out at Mom with harsh words. Gradually, relatives and neighbors all found out I had been cast out and sent back home. The flattery and praise I once received turned into mockery and disdain. Even Mom said she felt looked down upon when she was outside. One day, Aunt Lou next door was gossiping again, saying that I was caught red-handed having an affair outside, which was why I was sent back to my parents' home. I've never been one to swallow my anger silently. I gathered all the curses and venomous words I could think of in my mind and shouted at her at the top of my lungs. In the end, she was so scared by my scolding that she hid inside and didn't make a sound. From then on, the rumors did indeed lessen a lot. I've always had high aspirations, but my fate was fragile despite my lofty ambitions. From a young age, I knew that for someone from a family like mine, the only way to change destiny was to study with all my might. So I worked hard and focused single-mindedly, thinking about studying whether I was walking on the street or lying in bed. In the end, I achieved my goal and was admitted to the best university in the province. Everyone said I was a golden phoenix flying out of the countryside, stealing the spotlight in a village that rarely produced a university student in years. However, in the end, I never became some highly educated independent woman. I didn't even get the chance to develop my career before I prematurely entered marriage, ruining my future. After entering university, I gradually shed my previously dull and shabby appearance. With my good looks and decent intellect, I attracted many suitors. In my sophomore year, I met Vichant. He was outstanding in appearance, excellent in academics, refined and gentle, with exceptional popularity and character. No girl could refuse him, so I fell into the snare of love early on. On graduation day, Vichant proposed to me on campus. His vows were sincere and moving. I was so touched that tears streamed down my face. Smiling, I said, "I do," and amid the cheers of our friends, I reached out for him to place the ring on my finger. The wedding was grand, and it was only then that I clearly realized the vast difference between Vichant's family and mine. From a worldly perspective, it was obvious that I was reaching far above my station to be with him. Yet, his entire family showed no prejudice at all and joyfully welcomed me into their home. After the wedding, I found a well-paying job at a company, but within a few months, Vichant got me pregnant. The pregnancy was very difficult. I suffered from severe morning sickness, barely hanging on each day as if I were just barely alive. Both sets of parents and Vichant insisted that I quit my job and stay home to prepare for the baby. I was so weak that I had no choice but to agree. During my pregnancy, I was cared for with the utmost attention, but my mood grew worse and worse. The physical pain made me frown every day, and the emotional torment made life feel worse than death. My belly grew bigger, and Vichant came home later and later, until one day, Vichant's gaze started to avoid mine. he dodged my calls, and the constant ping of message alerts sounded, yet he didn't dare to check them in front of me. Once the seed of suspicion is planted, it takes root and sprouts. While he was showering, I secretly opened his phone and looked through the chat history. Nothing seemed unusual, and just as I thought I was overthinking, I noticed he had been frequently communicating with a certain phone number recently. I tried entering that number to search for a contact, and a photo of a woman by the seaside popped up. I knew who she was, his first love, Daisy. At that point, we finally erupted into the biggest argument we'd had in all these years. He explained that the woman was a representative sent by the client. I asked to see their chat history, but it had been wiped clean. He said it was that woman pestering him, and he was afraid I'd misunderstand if I saw it. Naturally, I didn't believe him. He swore to heaven that if he lied, he would be struck down by lightning and die a terrible death. Unfortunately, heaven did not strike him down. The result of this argument was Vicent, with red eyes, rushing me to the hospital to protect the pregnancy. From then on, things settled down between us. I no longer dared to joke about the baby. He took care of every little detail for me, and I relaxed and prepared for the birth. The atmosphere was peaceful, at least on the surface. Vicent's company was getting busier by the day, with his feet barely touching the ground. He took on many municipal projects and hired a lot of new staff. He couldn't personally handle everything anymore, so he hired a nanny to take care of me. On the day of the delivery, he hurried back from another province, nervously and tenderly holding my hand, saying, "Wife, you've worked hard." Mom. Richard could barely speak, and the first word he learned was Mom. He was very adorable, never shy around strangers, and rarely cried or fussed. My mother always said she had never seen such an easy child to take care of. But my father's attitude toward us grew worse and worse, never wearing a good expression all day, never holding his grandson, and constantly ordering my mother around to do this and that. In the past, I would send him some money every month for cigarettes and alcohol, but now I have no job, barely any savings, and a hungry baby to care for, so I stopped sending him that money. My father didn't have a steady job. From time to time, he would go out to do odd jobs. When he had nothing to do, he would eat and drink with his rowdy group of friends. That day, he got drunk again. My mother diligently and patiently took care of him, but he spoke to her disrespectfully. I told my mother to stop taking care of him. He then turned his anger on me, saying I brought him shame, that studying was useless, and that I was nothing but an unwanted slut. Before the divorce, no matter who he was angry with, he never dared to take it out on me. Even if I said or did something wrong, he would always smile and smooth things over. But times had changed. He finally unleashed all the resentment he had harbored against me over the years, saying whatever hurtful things came to mind, whatever filthy words he could think of. I looked at him coldly, took the child inside. If it weren't for the child, I might not have minded getting into a fight with him, but right now, I didn't want to bother with a drunkard. Yet, who would have thought, even if I don't provoke, others can still provoke me. Perhaps my indifferent, mocking gaze struck a nerve in his sensitive and fragile mind, because he recklessly lunged at me. A slap landed on my face before I could even react, and my mother was already standing in front of me. But my mother was no match for him. He kicked at her with both feet, and she screamed and burst into tears. I stepped forward to help, but he shoved me, and I fell onto the concrete floor, my head hitting the stone step at the doorway. My younger brother heard the noise and rushed out, grabbing him by the neck and throwing him to the ground. Pointing at his nose, he shouted, "If you dare mess up again, I won't recognize you as my father." I thought the matter would just blow over, but early the next morning, my dad gathered his brothers and sisters and stormed over, threatening to deal with us unfilial children. My mom stood at the front like a protective hen, shielding me and my brother, her grown chicks. My dad called us a bunch of ungrateful brats, kicked my mom aside, and threw 2 merciless punches at her face, as if she were not his wife but his sworn enemy. My dad ordered his brothers to beat up my brother. Outnumbered 4-2, my brother quickly lost ground, bleeding and pinned to the ground as fists and feet rained down on him relentlessly. His sister, my eldest aunt, a sturdy rural woman like a wall, stood in front of me. Strangely, she didn't dare lay a hand on me but only stopped me from rushing to save my mom and brother. No matter how much I shouted and struggled, I could only watch helplessly as my family was bullied. I felt a desperate isolation, my heart filled with anger and urgency, overwhelmed by grief, as if my insides were being torn apart. At that moment, Richard in the room also burst into tears. I was handcuffed by my aunt and couldn't move. My eyes were bloodshot as I shouted loudly, "If you have the guts, kill us all today. If you don't stop, I'll fight you to the death." Perhaps my voice was too fierce, they cursed and then stopped. Without hesitation, I called the police. Mom and my brother were taken to the hospital, and the rest of us were called to the police station for questioning. By chance, the officer questioning me was Tony. He looked clearly surprised to see me, and I felt both sad and embarrassed. He comforted me, telling me that everything would be properly resolved. He said, "Regarding you and Vicente, I feel sorry for you both. I don't know what happened between you, but maybe there's some misunderstanding." My heart was torn apart, but I forced myself to say it was nothing and begged him not to let Vicente find out about this. Later, I went to the hospital. The injury assessment didn't even qualify as a minor injury. I was only detained for a few days and paid some compensation to settle the matter. There was no going back home. I rented a place with my mother, younger brother, and Richard, and started sending out resumes to find a job. The early autumn wind was cold and rainy. I strode through the city of towering buildings in my high heels, feeling lost and lonely. Every HR asked me why I had such a long gap in my employment. When I finished explaining, they would nod understandingly and politely tell me to wait for their response. Sometimes I think of Vicente. He should be happily together with his first love by now. Actually, they were quite a match in every way: appearance, family background, and temperament. His first love had a very gentle temper, unlike me. After being caught in an autumn rain, I ended up catching a cold. My cold wasn't a big deal, but I passed it on to Richard. Mom bought medicine from a nearby pharmacy, but I didn't dare give it to the child casually. I took a listless Richard to the city hospital, the same private hospital where I gave birth. Vicente had once deposited 100,000 yuan there. I remember there were still tens of thousands left. Whenever the child was sick before, we would come here for treatment. The nurse who received us still kindly called me Mrs. Zhang. I had no time to correct her, I just wanted the child to get better soon. After the examination, the doctor ordered in 4 drip. I stood by his side, watching Richard's pale face, my heart aching terribly. Halfway through, I needed to use the restroom and asked the nurse for help. As I hurried out, I saw a familiar tall figure by the door, and my heart tightened. Vicente stood straight by the window, mottled light casting shadows over him. He wore the 3-piece suit he usually reserved for work, and a lit cigarette was pinched between the fingers of his right hand. I remembered he never smoked, let alone openly defied the hospital's no-smoking rules in a place like this. He turned to look at me, his probing gaze scanning me from head to toe, and said lightly, "You're sick too?" I didn't know why he happened to be at the hospital, nor did I want to answer him. I was about to lower my head and walk away, but he blocked my path. "I'm asking you a question," I snapped. "Please put out that cigarette. This is a hospital." He put out his cigarette and followed behind me. Richard was already awake by then, softly calling me Mom. I saw he looked much better and grabbed a toy to play with him. Vicente, treated like air, somehow pulled out a talking Ultraman figure and waved it in front of Richard's eyes to catch his attention. After more than a month apart, Richard had already forgotten Vicente. His eyes were wide open, looking like he wanted to play but was too afraid to. I sneered, "What are you still doing here? I thought we had everything settled?" His face froze for a moment, and his gaze hesitated as he looked at me. "I happened to come here with a friend." I took the baby bottle outside to get some hot water, but I saw Daisy, Vicente's first love, standing in line with a child to get vaccinated. When she saw me, she gave me a polite smile. "So this is the friend Vicente was talking about?" Holding the bottle with the prepared formula, I hurried into the hospital room and snatched Richard from Vicent's hands. Vicent looked baffled and said in a slightly reproachful tone, "You scared Richard." I calmed myself and tried to keep my voice steady. "Mr. Zhang, please stay away from my child. Don't forget, Richard is a child you don't acknowledge. From now on, he has nothing to do with you." He was momentarily speechless. I continued coldly, "I will have the child's name changed as soon as possible." Seeing the twisted anger on his face, a flash of satisfaction at my successful revenge passed through my heart. Although Vicent appeared gentle, humble, and courteous on the surface, I knew deep down he was a proud and domineering man. He accused me angrily and sorrowfully, "Bonnie, you really are a heartless woman." After Vicent left, I fed Richard his formula, reflecting on Vicent's final accusation. To be fair, Vicent's family had no complaints against me. They never wronged me materially or emotionally, and they respected my opinions when raising the child. Including the car, house, shares, and investments, I had my share. If I hadn't insisted on transferring them back to them during the divorce, I wouldn't be living in such destitution now. After giving birth, my emotions were very unstable. Vicent's suspicious behavior during that period kept me awake at night, anxious and uneasy. But without concrete evidence, I couldn't voice my suspicions. His every action no longer seemed normal to me. Even simply replying to a client's email in the study could keep me awake deep into the night. Vicent thought I was suffering from postpartum depression and once wanted to take me to see a psychologist, but I knew very well that what truly made me unhappy wasn't postpartum depression, it was him. I couldn't shake off this terrible mood and dragged Vicent down with me. Any trivial matter could ignite a fight between us. I didn't hesitate to attack him with the most venomous words, openly and covertly accusing him of being a fickle scoundrel. Every time we argued, I could even feel that he was suffering more than I was. After all, how could a man of such high caliber be a match for a sharp-tongued country shrew like me? One time that left a deep impression on me, I scolded him until he cried. That towering man wept so sorrowfully that for a moment, I felt guilty. But the fact that I could hurt him also made me feel that this was the punishment he deserved. In the months before the divorce, our marital relationship hit rock bottom. I refused to share marital intimacy with him, and he tacitly worked overtime every night until late before coming home. I always knew when he came home, but I pretended to be asleep. Occasionally, he would gently kiss me, but I felt disgusted inside, silently guessing whether he had quarreled with his new woman and was trying to make up for it with me, the old one. They say a woman with a son is unwanted, but gradually, people started arranging blind dates for me. My mother couldn't refuse them, so she asked for my opinion. I thought of that day at the hospital and smiled, saying, "I can give it a try." To be able to go home early every day to take care of Richard, I found a low-paying clerical job in the city. The boss joked that it was a waste of talent for a university graduate from a university like me to do this kind of work, and I could only smile without saying a word. Since we left, my father hasn't stopped picking fights with us. He found out where we live now through relatives and comes by every now and then to harass us, saying that my grandmother had an accident and is waiting in the hospital for someone to pay and take care of her, forcing my mother to go back and look after her. My mother, who has been weak all her life, was surprisingly resolute this time, saying that grandmother never treated her well and she absolutely would not go to the hospital to care for her. My father was furious and threatened harshly, "I've got a rotten life anyway. If you piss me off, I might as well spend the rest of my life in prison." My father's threats left the three of us, my mother, Richard, and me, restless and uneasy, afraid he might do something extreme. We discussed moving as soon as possible, but cheap and convenient housing was hard to find. Plus, since the three of us worked in different places, we couldn't settle on anything right away. I kept chatting sporadically with the blind date matches introduced to me, each day feeling like clocking in to complete a task, polite yet distant. I met two men who were also divorced with kids, but I felt nothing at all. It was then that I realized my mindset was off. I simply didn't want another marriage right now, so I hit the brakes in time and told my relatives I wasn't in the mood, and they didn't need to bother introducing anyone else. My relative said, "There's still one more you absolutely have to meet. This person has great qualities, never been married, handsome, tall, and has a good personality. I've watched him grow up, and his character is beyond question." I smiled and said, "Auntie, someone that good, why would he be interested in someone like me, divorced with a child?" The matchmaker also felt puzzled and forced a smile, saying, "I don't know about that. Anyway, he looked at your photo without asking anything, gave me 20,000 yuan, and told me to make sure you meet him." Not wanting the 20,000 yuan my relatives had given me to go to waste, I decided to meet this strange person. When I arrived at the agreed restaurant, I was so surprised that I was speechless for a moment. This strange person was actually Paul. Paul was a senior from university who had once pursued me almost obsessively, but by then my heart had long been secretly pledged to Vicente, so I had to ignore his advances. Paul spoke to me gracefully, chatting about recent events and expressing regret over my marriage. I quietly speculated on his insistence on meeting me. Was he trying to regain the dignity he lost with someone he once failed to win over? Or was he wanting to flaunt his current achievements to make me regret my past decisions? But I was wrong. Paul had always been polite, only sharing recent industry news and funny anecdotes from life, his tone like that of an old friend. When I got home, I found that my previously gloomy mood had actually lifted quite a bit. One day after work, I saw a car parked in the company's campus that looked familiar. It was Paul's car. I noticed him walking out of the building, chatting and laughing with two men in suits, and he happened to see me. He said goodbye to the two men and strode over to me. "What a coincidence, I just came over to handle some business. Want to have dinner together?" I took him to a nearby Chinese restaurant. Between words, he hinted that he now had a promising career, only missing a lovely companion to share the rest of his life with. I took a sip of tea, pretending not to catch his hint. After Paul drove me home and left, I stared after the car as it disappeared into the distance, lost in thought. The connections between people are truly strange. Paul is actually quite an outstanding and successful man. But I have no intention whatsoever of developing any romantic feelings for him. His place in my life might be as an alumnus, a classmate, a senior, a friend, but never as a lover. Why was Vicente so certain, so determined to question me, convinced that I would have something going on with him? Just as I was about to turn and go upstairs, my arm was suddenly grabbed by a large hand. My heart skipped a beat. This neighborhood is cheap to rent in, full of all kinds of people. I didn't know if this one was about to rob me. I struggled fiercely, but he pulled me forcefully into his embrace. Before I could see his face clearly, I caught a strong smell of alcohol mixed with a faint scent of men's cologne. That scent is something I will never forget in my life. It was my ex-husband, Vicente. I gave up struggling and calmly asked, "What are you doing here?" Vicente's voice was cold and icy, with a barely perceptible trace of anger. "Shouldn't I be here? Interrupting your good times?" I pushed him away. "Vicente, you haven't forgotten we're already divorced, have you? What madness are you acting out now?" In the darkness, Vicente's face carried a mocking sneer. "Yeah, we're divorced. You rushed to divorce me just to be with him? After all these years waiting, he sure is deeply devoted to you." I sneered back, "Since you know it all, then don't be a nuisance here." Those words finally stung Vicente. He stretched out his long hand, pulling me into his arms again, while his other hand firmly held my head, forcefully covering my lips. Vicente was like a beast unleashed, wild and brutal, gradually ravaging my territory until I could barely breathe, and only then did he finally let go of me. As we both gasped for air, we heard my mom's voice, "Vicente? You too?" It turned out she had come downstairs to take out the trash and, seeing me tangled up with a man, thought I was being bullied. Vicente immediately reverted to his usual obedient son-in-law persona and politely greeted her with a mom. My mom had always liked Vicente and, out of respect for my feelings, had never pressed about our relationship. But running into us tonight, she simply invited him upstairs. Vicente frowned as he looked around the small two-room apartment we rented, furnished plainly, cramped. My mom made him a bowl of sour plum soup to sober up, hoping the three of us could calmly talk things through. Vincent brought toys for Richard, who usually goes to bed at 10, but tonight it was already 10:30 and he was still too excited to settle down. I took the child from his hands and said, "You should go now." "Maybe it was the courage that comes from alcohol," he stubbornly said. "I'm not leaving, I want to sleep here. My wife and son are here, where else could I go?" I laughed in frustration. "Vincent, don't tell me you regret this, there's no cure for regret in this world." He hogged the bed and wouldn't let go, and before long he fell asleep. Looking at his almost childlike sleeping face, I felt a flicker of pity. He must have been utterly exhausted, otherwise, with his good habits and upbringing, he wouldn't have gone to bed without washing up, nor would he have slept in a full professional outfit. His vision was dark and bluish-black, his face slightly haggard, the tough facade gone. At this moment, he was as meek as a lamb. I couldn't move him, so I had my younger brother put him to sleep, while my mother and I stayed in the next room. The next day was the weekend. Early in the morning, I was woken by a loud banging on the door. Realizing what it was, I immediately got up and went to the living room to open it. It was my father, accompanied by his brothers and sisters. I instantly regretted not moving out sooner. Trembling, I tried to dial 911, but my father snatched my phone away and threw it to the ground, shattering it into pieces. His siblings poured into the house, and the living room quickly became overcrowded. I shouted at them, asking what they wanted. My father snarled, "You heartless wolves, the old man is lying sick in bed, and yet you live your lives so carefree." His siblings also began to hurl vicious insults and accusations, but before long, their voices faded away, and the entire hall fell into a sudden silence. My dad asked in surprise, "Vincent, what are you doing here?" I looked back and saw that the others at home had woken up. My mom and younger brother were glaring angrily at my dad. Vincent, holding Richard, looked calm and composed. "Dad, bringing so many people here, aren't you afraid of scaring Richard? This isn't the place to discuss things. If there's something to talk about, I'll go out with you." Vincent handed Richard to my mom and said softly, "Mom, you feed Richard breakfast first." Then he took my hand and walked out. They all exchanged glances and finally had no choice but to follow us downstairs. My dad and the others had long lost their previous arrogance. They suddenly became uneasy in front of Vincent, a junior, and kept explaining, "It's all a misunderstanding. We had no choice. The elderly person is in the hospital with no one to care for them. It's truly pitiful." Vincent already had a commanding presence, and his cold smile was especially captivating. He simply said, 100,000 yuan. If you're willing, take it and let Bonnie use it to honor the elders. As far as I know, the elders have never taken Bonnie and her brother out before. I'm doing this purely to save face for you, Dad, but I hope nothing like today happens again. If it does, it won't be as simple as just a few days of detention. As soon as my dad's side received the money, they left. I breathed a sigh of relief and only then realized that Vincent and I had been holding hands tightly the whole time. Vincent smiled at me. My cheeks instinctively warmed, and I let go, whispering, "Thank you." Vincent seemed quite pleased. "Hungry? Let's go grab some breakfast." We found a nearby noodle shop. I remembered how, years ago at school, we used to go to the cafeteria every morning together for breakfast, then head to the library to study. Back then, we were inseparable, privately pledged to each other, as if there was no room for anyone else. So when exactly did things start to change? I remember, it was Vincent who changed first. He was the one who was unfaithful, the one who was entangled unclearly with his first love. Why? Even now, I finally have the courage to ask this question. Vincent, if the one you love is Daisy, why are you with me? If the one you love is me, why are you still involved with Daisy? Or is it that you don't love anyone at all, only yourself? He was stunned by my question, then broke into a warm, gentle smile, as if what I said was some ridiculous nonsense. I was so angry I threw down my chopsticks and ran out. He hurried after me, saying, "So, you still care about me, don't you?" I didn't answer, and he continued, "You don't believe a single word of my explanation? When have I ever lied to you? I asked him, then why were you always chatting ambiguously with her before, deleting the chat records, and making 8 calls a day? Vincent sighed and slowly explained, because during that time, you were uncomfortable during your pregnancy, and I didn't know what to do. I asked every woman I knew who had given birth how to take care of you. I also asked her, but I didn't expect that she had just gotten divorced and was in a bad emotional state when I ran into her. I comforted her a bit, and as a result, she clung to me, calling me every day. I didn't dare let you know, so I had to hide it from you. I didn't expect you to find out anyway. I recalled that back then Vincent did indeed buy some inexplicable things every now and then for me to eat, giving me massages daily and lighting calming incense. I continued asking, so you still went on road trips with her? Vincent smiled. You saw it on Tony's Facebook, right? I asked him to post it. Just to see if you'd get anxious, if you'd come back looking for me. I glared at him, and he went on, at that time, you looked like you wanted to cut ties with me completely. I felt terrible every day, so I arranged with Tony to go out for a trip. But unexpectedly, she showed up with another friend. By then, she had already returned to normal and even remarried our mutual friend, the guy on her right. I remembered that there was indeed another man in that photo. I took out my phone and flipped to that picture, discovering some details I hadn't noticed before. Daisy was clearly closer and more intimate with the other man, yet I had assumed from the start that she was with Vincent. I took a deep breath and asked again, since they're both married, why did you still accompany her to the hospital? Vincent looked at me puzzled, and I patiently explained, when Richard was sick, I saw her at that same hospital. Weren't you there with her? Vincent rubbed his forehead and smiled helplessly. God wouldn't play tricks on me like that. I only rushed over because I got a billing message from the hospital. How could I have been with her? The hospital isn't my home. If we can go, then naturally she can go too. Why do you always overthink things? My mind was a tangled mess. Was that true? Was I just worrying myself unnecessarily? Then why did Vincent think Richard wasn't his child? I asked my final question, then why did you say Richard was Paul's child? He paused for a moment, then pulled me into a taxi and took me back to our former home. He took several boxes out of a safe deposit box, his expression darkening as he said, "These are all the things Paul has sent you over the years." I intercepted them all. I was stunned, completely unaware of this. I opened a few boxes. They were filled with gold and silver jewelry. Each box contained a handwritten card, Bonnie, happy birthday, wishing you health year after year, Paul. Vincent sneered, but the most important one is this. You open it yourself. I slowly unwrapped the box, which was clearly several times larger than the others, and inside was a golden Buddha statue. A card slipped out of the packaging, inscribed with a lifetime of peace, dated on the day Richard was born. I tossed the card aside and hurriedly looked into Vincent's eyes, saying, I don't know about any of this. I don't know why he would do something like this. Vincent simply said, I had it appraised. It's solid pure gold, quite valuable. He really did go all out. I grew anxious and grabbed his hand. No, there's nothing between me and him. Vincent's deep, dark eyes fixed on me. In those few months after we got married, did you see him? I struggled to recall, and finally managed to dredge up some vague memories. Back then, I got married right after graduation, and only after the wedding did I start anxiously looking for a job. Without any internship experience, I asked a few friends to refer me, but none of the resumes got through. A friend suggested I try reaching out to Paul since we were in the same field. He had a wide network and a good reputation. So I contacted him, and sure enough, I succeeded. I treated him to a meal afterward, but that was as far as it went. At the time, I was worried Vincent might overthink things, so I never mentioned it to him, but he actually knew all along. Feeling a bit guilty, I explained the whole story to him. My voice caught as I spoke, and I emphasized again, Richard is our child. Between him and me, there really was nothing else. He sat down hard on the bed after listening, pulling me onto his lap. Of course I know Richard is our child. How could I not know my own seed? I snapped, then why did you say those things to me? Do you realize how hurtful those words are? Vincent chuckled softly. I regretted saying them right after, but I never apologized because I wanted to get back at you. I asked in disbelief, what right do you have to get back at me? He snorted, don't I have the right? You heartless woman, just think about how you treated me these past 2 years. This was the second time he called me heartless. How could I be heartless? That was slander. When things were good, you were great, but whenever there was a problem, you never wanted to talk to me properly or listen to my explanations. It was either angry words or cold violence from you. Every time we argue, you say the harshest things. I am only flesh and blood, I get tired, I feel pain. Do you know that every time we fight, the way you look at me is like you want to kill me? In an instant, my heart trembled, and I realized that whenever there's a dispute, I think of my mother. When I was little, my mother was beaten and scolded by my father, and my sister and I were powerless, only able to cry. When Vincent and I argue, I always fear falling into that same situation. Deep down, I'm always trying to make up for it, all I know is that I can't be as weak as my mother was. But Vincent is not like my father. He is so outstanding, gentle, and kind. He has never done anything to hurt me. How unfair this is to him, my boy, my lover, who has endured so many grievances. Vincent continued, agreeing to divorce you was me gambling that you would soften once. I thought you would, but you left so cleanly and decisively, giving up everything, including me. I went from hope to despair, yet you still didn't come back, and even went on blind dates with others. So I regret it, I shouldn't have let you go. If I had shown up a little later, would you really have been with someone else? Can't you, just this once, feel some pity for me? Tears blurred my vision as I leaned on his shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably, repeating over and over, it's my fault, it's my fault. Vincent's eyes glistened with tears as he gently kissed and caressed me, but then my phone rang, it was Paul. I wanted to hang up, but Vincent stopped me and decisively said, answer it, put it on speaker. Paul's voice came through the phone, light and cheerful, Bonnie, it's the weekend today, come out and play with the kids. I'd booked tickets to the aquarium. I said hoarsely, Paul, let's meet up, the cafe on Shuangfeng Road. Seeing Vincent and me together, Paul froze, standing still, his face looking somewhat dazed, but he quickly regained his composure and smiled as he greeted the two of us. I smiled and pushed the bag in my hand toward him. These gifts are too extravagant, we can't accept them. Don't send anything again. Vincent added sternly from the side, also, keep your improper thoughts to yourself. Paul looked at me deeply, sighed almost inaudibly, said, of course. Then he picked up his things and left. On Monday, Vincent and I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to remarry. When his parents heard the news, they were overjoyed and insisted on throwing a big banquet, inviting a group of relatives and friends to our home to celebrate. I only brought my mother and my younger brother to the feast. Surrounded by relatives and friends, we kissed and drank the nuptial wine in front of everyone, then were both pushed into a room. Vincent, with his sharp brows and bright eyes, looked especially sexy in his slight drunkenness. He smiled at me and said, some of our friends have already had their third child, we need to catch up. I threw him onto the bed, biting his neck as I said, I'm going out to work, if we have 3 kids, you'll have to stay home and take care of them. His deep voice sounded again, so what? After remarrying, I quit my previous clerical job and started my own agency. Business was neither booming nor terrible, it was just enough to get by, making a modest profit. My mom continued to help take care of Richard. The child was getting more and more restless by the day. My mom lost 5 pounds in a month, and Vincent hired a nanny to assist. With Vincent around, my dad didn't dare cause trouble. Occasionally, Vincent would have me transfer 1,000 or 2 to my dad as living expenses, just to avoid misfortune by spending a little money. The chaotic days had temporarily passed. A year went by, and one day I was surprised to realize I hadn't argued with Vincent in a long time. So when he came to pick me up from work, I deliberately asked, is the new receptionist your company hired very pretty? He saw through my thoughts at a glance and played along. Here's a new little sister for you. As the older sister, you better treat her well from now on. I squeezed his waist hard, and he laughed. Today I'll take you to eat something delicious. I asked, just the two of us? He said, just the two of us. The sunset streamed through the car window, shining on our smiling faces. I felt there was no moment happier than this.